Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton.
I made the pitch at the wrong time. All right.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here with Eric Deepen, my friend from the Village Church in Tucson, Arizona. I am from Mission Church. Eric didn't want to intro this podcast. He was ready to go.
I forgot we do intros.
Yeah, we do intros. So there was some talk today about Taylor Swift, Super Bowl, the tragic events, why in Kansas City. What's behind some of that? Lent, fasting, and somehow it tied together.
And the demon-possessed boy in Mark.
And the man with an unclean spirit in Mark 1.
That's right. I keep getting the transfiguration, Matthew 17, stuck in my head.
So it does indeed all come together, and we hope you enjoy the podcast.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you, guys. All right. Andy, what were you doing last week?
Wow, I don't know. It's been a long time.
You canceled on me. You're like, I can't be there.
Oh yeah. Let's see. I wasn't here.
You weren't even in the city.
Was I in the city, or was I?
It was a Friday of last week. You were prepping for Lent and Ash Wednesday. So you're just a weekend of partying and
it's something. Yeah. For some reason, I couldn't be here.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, Eric.
For some reason.
Yeah.
This is how pastors work. They're like, I don't know why I don't even know what I was doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to
think.
I was
caught up in the third heaven.
Oh, always. Yeah.
Which in my mind is just sleeping.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure Paul just was like, I was sleeping.
I was sleeping.
Yeah. In the third heaven.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe he was on a Zoom call.
Yeah. So, okay. I have a list that's out of my head because I wrote it down, but it's in my car. So here we go. This is the new fun part of Faith Over Breakfast.
Okay.
Number one, we could talk about all the things around the Super Bowl because there's lots of interesting things other than the game. Some very distressing, some a little lighter. So there's Super Bowl, there's Taylor Swift, there's a shooting at the parade.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that. We could also talk about what were some of the other things I had on my list here. Oh, yeah, we could talk about the war because war seems to be escalating and getting anxious.
A particular war or the
Israel Hamas thing? Ukraine is still there. The opposition leader died the Russian opposition leader, I forget his name, died in prison. We could talk about fasting because we just started Lent for those of us who practice Lent.
Yeah.
This is so fasting is a very interesting thing because I don't know how much church history you've read, but the early church was very quickly fasting. I think Wednesdays and Fridays.
Okay.
We know this from the Didash or whatever, the earliest writings we have from.
Okay.
So fasting was a big part. Wesley complained in the 1700s or 1800s. When was Wesley? I forget. I always get him wrong. It's 1800s,
I would
right?
think 1800s.
Yeah, he complained that that Christians didn't even know what fasting was.
Yeah.
So it's
okay.
Yeah, so there's that. We could talk about are our churches just normal conservative evangelical churches in disguise, or are they something different?
Oh, okay.
So these are things I've been thinking about. Any of those hit you?
I'm coming off of a long Zoom call, Eric, so you decide.
Was there anything interesting? Well, you usually have some snarky comment about each one of those.
I know. I don't have the snark today.
So let's start light and go deep. Let's just talk about the Taylor Swift effect.
The Taylor Swift effect.
Like this Super Bowl was the most watched Super Bowl.
Yeah, I believe it.
I think the only thing that was more watched was the moon landing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I would have thought there was more people watching this than the moon landing.
Yeah, well,
technology.
Yeah, I guess this is what I didn't check my sources, but it was something I heard on sports radio. So I'm trusting them, or sports YouTube. There's no sports radio. I don't listen to sports radio.
Well, it was a good second half in my mind. Yeah. I didn't have a quote unquote dog in the fight as far as teams go. I never really do with football, but it was an enjoyable game to watch, being down to the last second.
Yeah,
and Travis Kelce did not propose, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Though many people wondered, right? What a moment that would have been.
Yeah.
But he yelled at the coach and has created a meme of a generation.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can move on quickly, but I really am actually interested in your opinion as to why we are. What's the fascination with Taylor Swift? Because I'm even just fascinated with her. I don't even know much of her music. I know when one of her songs are playing, she has a distinct voice, you can tell. But other than that, I'm not like, ooh, Taylor Swift. She's not on any of my playlists.
She's the epitome of the story of a successful woman. I mean, she's fought the powers and prevailed. She, couldn't get the rights to her music, re-recorded it. Writes all her own stuff, has, she when she goes to the Super Bowl, she's well aware that if she were performing, she'd have more people in that building, and she'd have 3 shows that week instead of 1. And she is well aware, as is probably Travis Kelce, that that her being there is boosting everything. And, it's an incredibly captivating story, as you've been watching. If you've been watching kind of the rise of the, wondering like, can women do this? Can they have this kind of role in society? And she seems to be the proof that you can. It's there's a lot of influence. You can exert power for yourself,
right?
And do it while still being a girl.
So I think
that's a key too.
Is that
girls
relate.
Huge. That could probably get unpacked.
Well, I think so. Like, I heard a woman commentator kind of analyzing Taylor versus Beyonce, and talking about how Taylor is very careful in her songs not to sexualize them in the same way. Oh, okay. And when she dances, though, it is it's enticing, it's not sexualized.
Interesting.
Right? So she doesn't use her, like, she doesn't use the typical onstage dancing that sexualizes. Doesn't mean that she isn't enticing while she's standing on the stage, but it seems that she's very aware of her audience, which are teenage girls, and her songs are about broken hearts and love stories and anger at being betrayed and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, she's simultaneously very vulnerable and very not.
Yes. That's a good way of looking at that.
Yeah. Yeah, vulnerable, she chooses, right? That vulnerable in the way that she decides. And so,
sure.
And there's a power in that vulnerability. I mean, I remember hearing somebody say over the last week that, how much Travis Kelce probably wonders if he will someday be the focus of one of her breakup songs, right?
Right.
And,
right, and the very fact that we speculate about all that stuff.
Oh, right. Exactly. Yeah. So here's this big football man yelling at his coach, almost knocking him over, but our speculation is like, would he dare propose to Taylor in this moment? Because she might say no in front of everybody on television. And does he wonder if he'll be the next breakup song that, she makes millions on? Like, she is more powerful than him. And so here's the epitome of what our culture views as a powerful man.
What's his brother's name from the Eagles?
Kelsey.
Yeah. And apparently I found out that his dad, that's not how it's Kels is how it's pronounced, but
it doesn't matter.
People kept
his name doesn't matter.
So dad just said, fine,
Kelsey.
Kelsey's what we are.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was saying that, he had to move. They didn't, but what's his name? What's Kelsey's for? Travis Kelce?
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, he had to move out of his house as soon as he started dating her because of the media.
Yeah.
And then when they bought their new house, the very first week, people were pounding on the windows, even though they had tried to keep it all secret.
Yeah.
So there's this.
They should get an island.
Well, and he was saying, like, there's football fame, and then there's this kind of fame, like celebrity fame. Like, football fame, fans will come up to you like, oh, hey, no. When you go to the superstar fame, this is a whole different world. You're a god.
Right.
And I think that's the interesting thing. I think she's Athena. She's a god. She's or a goddess. And if she talks to you, you're blessed. Like, she can offer the blessing. She can fill the stage. She can.
Yeah. And one of her early strategies was that sometimes she did respond to her fans on social media. And so she might actually respond to you. Right. And that was
I hear she still combs through
sure.
stuff and tries to do that. Like, I mean, she understands the whole optics of being connected to your fan base.
Right. Yeah, she's smart.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but it's true on worship. It's like what worship, like, you want to see what worship looks like of somebody. This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's true.
Anyway, and then tragic things happen, like the shooting at the Chiefs parade. And I don't know if they've come up with motives behind why it all happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware that it happened. I scanned one article. That's where I sit this morning.
Me
on
too.
That issue. Yeah,
it was really sad, and I mean, it's kind of crazy because in some senses, violence is going down in our society, but things like this are going up.
Yeah, American mass shooting and radicalization is alarming.
It is very alarming and disturbing.
It's disturbing, and it's unique to us. Yeah. I mean, there are other nations where there's genocide, and that's a whole nother deal. That's another.
And there's blowing yourself up in cafes and things like that.
Yep.
But this getting a handgun or getting an automatic gun and then shooting people in a crowd. Like, what do you think the ethos behind all that is? Like, what's going on in our society? Because I know the Band-Aid is not more or less gun control. Maybe that helps a little bit. Maybe but there's something else going on.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a documentary recently about a shooting that happened at in an astronomy department in Iowa, and this was it just happens to be the one I dove into the most recently. And the young man wanted to kill professors and students because he was second in his class instead of first. And one of the professors was reflecting on that and thinking about himself and saying, man, I have some of that in me too. I want to be first. And that's a unique one. We do have the motive. I don't want to say that's a theme, but it might be. I mean, there's a deep longing for significance.
Yeah, I think that's what to be important.
Yeah,
and it's
because it's not just pain. Because then you might take your own life. It's a longing to matter. Yeah,
right. So I remember being junior high, so mid '80s, and then high school, and there were a lot of shootings, but they were all in the inner city.
Right.
They were drive-by shootings was the thing we talked about. The fear of being, depending on where I lived, because I have lived all over the country, drive-by shootings were more of a fear or less of a fear.
And those were normally you're going to be in the crossfires of somebody else's conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Where this seems more random and more individualized.
Mm-hmm. And the person, you can't characterize them as easily. In the drive-by shooting stereotype, it was like, here comes the slow-moving, old Chevy on, lowrider wheels with a guy hanging out the window, and then there's this is the stereotype, right? And there's some guys hanging out in front of a liquor store dealing drugs, and he's trying to knock one of them off because they're on his territory.
Right.
You find yourself in that situation, you go, oh no, I got to get out of here. And the new feeling, and that is a major stereotype, by the way, and it's an evil one, I should say, that's not accurate.
No.
But the new version is it could be anybody, right? It's like somebody who looks like a middle-aged mom, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who looks like a nice little middle-class boy, highly likely.
Yeah.
You're at a music event with fellow fans, and one of them's a little seems a little down, well, maybe they need support, or maybe they're going to hurt somebody. Like, you don't know, right? It feels random. Like it could happen to anybody. It feels unpredictable. Like you can't classify who's going to do it. Is it a racial minority? Is it the angry white boy who, feels like he has a meaningless life? Is it the person who's gone through family hardship? You can't sort it. It's like all over the place, right? And I think that, but there are themes.
Yeah.
That significance is probably one of them.
So do you think that like some of the like vitriol that happens on the internet, like one example recently I heard about was Julia Roberts posted a picture of herself in the morning playing cards with her niece. And it got reposted, no makeup, like any of us look when we get out of bed and play cards with our niece on a day off, right?
Sure.
And it was probably like any of us would love to do. We post the picture. We're only posting it for our friends and our relatives so they can see like, oh, your niece, you're playing cards. Like, how fun.
Or
like,
if you're a celebrity, you're trying to humanize yourself. Like,
yeah,
I'm
a little
normal
bit.
person too.
Yeah, whatever the goal is. It didn't sound like she had any ulterior motives any more than I would post on the internet.
Sure.
And she just kind of listed out sort of how badly she got attacked about, she looks like a man. She's aging terribly. They went on and on and on. And that's just that, but that happens all over the place.
Yeah.
And you even last podcast, you were talking about your one bad review.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it spills out. Like the internet's violent. There's a lot of violent dialogue that goes on.
Yep.
And it's fostered by multiple people, like all
well, it's
over
fostered by the people who claim to be violent. It's fostered by those who claim not to be.
Right.
It's fostered by those who are anti-social justice. It's fostered by those who are pro-social justice. It's and again, like why online, and I think I would say there's this longing to be significant. Like, I mean, when I think about the person that wanted to tear me down online, like, I know them, and I know they are very torn as to like their own significance and how like appreciated they are, and the things that they do are right and other people don't see it. And I get it, I feel those things. And, and it's just tough because that's a legitimate longing, but it's way easier to be anonymous online, and I think frankly it's easier to take a weapon to a parade than to wrestle with my longing to be significant and my feeling that I'm not, and to wonder what does significance really mean.
But you gotta be careful here, Andy. You're starting to sound like a villager.
Gross.
Significance, security, being known.
Yeah.
I think you're right in that anger online and then anger out in the public is power, and power at least gives you some sense of safety, and it gives you significance.
Yeah.
So you
feel more alive and you feel powerful.
Yeah, when that's part of it. We have a world that is, and particularly our culture, where you are pretty much told that you're not significant.
Do you think we feel more alive when it feels like we're hurting someone?
I think a little bit. I think we it's just powerful. It feels powerful.
But there's a when I'm saying feeling alive, there's a power side of life.
Yeah, taking someone else's life
or
being violent towards them.
Or like taking hurting Julia Roberts, here's somebody she's got the power, she's big and rich, but I have this I can hurt her with my words, and that feels like I'm significant.
Yeah, no, I totally. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's our world at the moment. It's a little saddening. But I will say I'm happy to be part of Lent and in fasting mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, even just the last 2 days have been good for me.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell us about it.
yeah, it's just this year. Well, last year I was in sabbatical, so I was already like had pulled a lot of things out of my life. But this year I just said I'm going to shut down all shows, anything I watch. Like I just cut it all out. The only thing that I watch on is YouTube lectures. If like things that I do for work, and I prefer to watch somebody lecturing instead of listening to them lecture or whatever. Or they're only on YouTube doing that lecture. So, yeah. And it just I've ended up in bed earlier, read more books, felt more at peace, felt more connected to God in just 2 days of not really thinking about escaping into the world of other people's stories.
Yeah.
That aren't true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys have not moved into doing Lent yet. I haven't gotten you there. I haven't gotten the mission church there yet.
You're
you're
working on it.
I'm trying hard. I'm
Yeah.
going to get you there someday.
So what are you reading?
What am I reading at the moment? Oh, goodness. So I am reading The Paradise King.
Okay.
And then it has this very long, subtitle. It's by Blaine Eldridge, so the son of John. And it is probably, I would argue, at this point, it's in the top 10 books I've ever read in my life.
Whoa.
When I heard it, recommended, Dan Allender recommended it, and he said it was in the top 3 books he's ever read in his life. And I will agree that it could get there.
Wow.
It's that good.
Wow.
It's this beautiful retelling of the entire Bible, all centered around Jesus, and it moves from this very he's a really good narrative writer, so he's retelling the story. He also has a pretty extensive knowledge of ancient history, so he's weaving in all the other cultures around Abraham and around David and around the prophets and the whole narrative in the beginning. So other creation myths up against, but he'll shift. So he'll have this amazing sort of narrative where he's retelling this Bible story, and then he'll shift into an academic couple paragraphs, and then you're back in. So he's doing this really interesting juxtaposition, and he's a very good writer.
Wow.
So
cool.
It's been really enjoyable. And then the other one I've been reading is by, this is funny, it's by this woman who, what is her, Havilah? What is her last name? Cunnington. Havilah Cunnington. She's actually the wife of the pastor of Bethel.
Okay.
Pentecostal church in California.
Where things have not been going so well.
Other Bethel. They're not part of the Kansas City world. They're the Bethel of California, not the Bethel.
California Bethel.
That's another thing.
I'm confusing my Bethels.
Yeah, anyway, this is about hearing God. And the whole basic narrative is that she grew up in the Pentecostal world where everybody could hear God and she couldn't. Right? So you hear the voice of God. And everybody's saying things like, which you and I experience probably a lot, and have maybe even said ourselves, is God said to me. And so she kind of walks through how evangelicals in general, and Pentecostals even more, have built their entire structure around one form of hearing God, which is the literal voice of God in the way that we talk. And then we say, this is how you have a relationship. This is like the thing. And so she basically breaks it down into 4 ways of hearing God, shows how that shows up in Scripture, and then gives some really good ways of determining what your stronger point is, how you develop that, how you use that in community, and how it works. And it's really, really good. So those are the 2 books that I'm reading that are nonfiction. And then I don't remember the title of the book, but Sue and I are reading this kids' adventure book about these 2 children who go on a quest. We like junior high fiction. So
cool. Yeah. Very fun.
Yep.
Nice. So that's Lent.
That's Lent. At this point, those 2 books.
Yeah.
And then whatever I'm reading in Scripture.
Yeah. That's great.
Yep.
Do you fast in the food department?
Not necessarily, though. I have been reflecting on how the early church didn't see fasting. Well, they saw some aesthetic, reducing your consumption of things. But fasting in general, if you had said, I am fasting, they wouldn't say something like,
right.
I'm stopping and listening to the local story down at the at the gate. They would say, no, I'm fasting food. And actually, they didn't fast 24 hours like we do. It was a 2-meal fast. So usually they would have dinner. In fact, Ramadan comes from Lent.
Oh, interesting.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the Muslims got Ramadan from Lent.
Oh, okay.
Lenten practices. So yeah, the fasting I think is not that like. No, when Jesus fasted 40 days, those kinds of fasts are without food for 40 days. But
those are more intense or periodic. I don't.
Fasts
I haven't done a deep dive on fasting.
So usually Wednesday and Friday, I believe you fast, and you fasted 2 meals. And you're just supposed to use, I don't know if you fasted. You just didn't eat all day until dinner.
Yeah.
So probably for people, you fasted breakfast or whatever you ate as you headed out the door to work.
I had this thought, and actually I'm toying with it for my sermon, but talking about Jesus casting out a demon-possessed man. Yeah. Or a demon from an unclean spirit from a demon. As it said.
Yeah, so that's coming off the Mount of Transfiguration. Are you guys
not at this point? We're in Mark 1.
Oh, you're in Mark 1.
So the here's a thought I've had. So you get to change my sermon if you can just totally rip it to shreds.
Okay, but I'm so excited.
In ancient cultures, or especially the one we're reading about in the Hebrew Scriptures, the assumption was that a spiritual reality would work itself out and manifest physically. And then we became, rationalists in Western culture began to doubt that that's how it worked and said, no, the things that are working themselves out in your body are just natural things. And now I think that we've actually nearly come full circle, except we now believe in culturally there's way more openness to spiritual realities. We're less settled on which ones they are, and I think that we now believe that the things that you do physically, it's kind of, we reversed it. It was the things you did spiritually work themselves out physically, and now we think the things we do physically work themselves out spiritually. So I'm saying people will, there's a lot of fasting. There's a lot of
intermittent fasting.
There's a lot of mindfulness. There's a lot of practices, healthy eating, exercise, so on and so forth. And the belief is if you do these things well, you'll have a better spiritual life. Your inner life will improve.
Especially if you're in some religious form. I hear it a lot in the non-religious as, because you're worshiping your temple, basically, your body.
Yeah, well, I'm saying it's the same. It's if you're embracing a religion, you would say this is going to make your religious life better. And so that's the spiritual practices are all hot again because it's like if you do this physical thing, it'll work itself out spiritually. But also, if you take away the religious language, it's the same. If you do this external thing, it'll work itself out inwardly. You'll feel better. You'll be more centered. You'll be more present.
Yeah.
And so, it's, anyway, ancient world, the things that you do internally work themselves out externally. Our world, the things you do externally work out in the inward. And I wonder, if we recognize how similar, and my theory is that, is it really unidirectional, that it works one way and then the other, or is the truth that it's multi-directional?
Sure. Well, I don't know if I will change your sermon, but let me posit this theory.
Posit.
Okay, so you have Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. That drives, the enlightenment. That's your mind. And the dualism of body and mind kind of has sunk itself into Christianity and influences us. Yes. I would say that there's then this movement in Christianity in particular of late, but probably starting in the mid-90s, and this move that I need to move my mind, what's happening in my mind, to my heart, right? So so my emotions are involved and all that kind of stuff. But I would argue that what you're now touching on is what I see in this later generation is now when it's not just my heart, my emotions and my mind, but now I got to move to my body. And my body's the thing that's important in impacting my emotions and impacting my mind.
Yeah. And which is, I mean, would even lead into some sexual conversations around like, if I get my body lined up, it'll make my mental experience or my spiritual or my sexual or my relational experience different. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would argue, so maybe we've finally landed in the space where we're conscious that our body is the vehicle with which the temple of God is mobily moving around and how the image bearing is represented. Like without my body, I there's no representation. So it has a significant part. And I think the desires that are built into my body, like the desire to eat and what I'm going to have for lunch, that overrides deeper and more important desires, like whatever I hope for my wife or my family, like the longings I have for them. I spend a lot more time on the one that's satiating this immediate experience. So yeah, I agree with all those things you're saying. I think it's now become this much more complex space that we're in.
We do have trouble holding things together.
Yes. I think that, and so I think but I also think the demonic part of it is that so all those ways of thinking about things and the science that we have wasn't present, and so the demonic powers have space to manipulate what's happening. And the more knowledge we have, the demonic powers just shift. Say, okay, fine, like we don't manifest ourselves the same way, but now we're going to deceive you into now we're going to change.
Same outcome, different approach.
Yeah, we're just going to work with whatever kind of new ideas that you have decided the world.
Well, and in Mark 1, it's an interesting moment where the man with the unclean spirit is interrupting the teaching of Jesus, but the teaching of Jesus hasn't yet been explained in Mark 1. And so that's an interesting, you do have this moment of like the spiritual realm is engaging with the teaching of the kingdom and of what it means to be a disciple. And so Jesus is in the synagogue reading and teaching, and there's some thought that this is the moment where he...
they link it up to Luke.
Is saying the kingdom of God is at hand. The prisoners are going to be set free in the day of the Lord.
Isaiah 61.
Yeah. And the unclean spirit is confronting and trying to shut that message down, but that message isn't just knowledge. The kingdom of God is all encompassing.
Well, in Mark 1 there's like a flood of healings as Jesus comes back out of the wilderness. And Matthew affirms that too. So
his after his wilderness testing, and in Mark it starts to get very rapid fire immediately. As if it's a day, like a very intense day's work.
It's really interesting how Jesus Mark interprets it all, either through Peter or and it's very, very interesting. He's just like bam, 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 bam.
Yeah.
And then the other authors, Matthew picks some of that up, and John even picks some of that of the fast movement of things.
And then Mark draws out the passion narrative.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the secret revelation. He's slowly being revealed as he goes along.
Yes.
And how he's trying to keep that under wraps.
Right.
Yeah, it's a fascinating. I love Mark. I'm excited you guys are preaching on it.
Me too. Well, is that a podcast?
I think that's a podcast.
Well, thanks,
think we're
thanks
significant
for being
and secure in this podcast.
Are we? Oh, that sure helps. That sure helps. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. You can rate us on all platforms. You can email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can say hello to Eric at the Village Church.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for fasting, you
if you're
can
looking
join in with them for Lent.
Church,
you can say hello to me at Mission Church. Usually there.
Yeah, usually there.
Yeah, almost all the time.
Yeah.
And we would love to interact.
Yeah, and from your social media, I would assume that you guys are like on a gigantic drive-in screen.
Oh, yeah. And, if you if you ever get tired of, tearing down Julia Roberts, Eric's Instagram's pretty fire, so you might want to check it out.
Hey, I do have this thought. Okay, I'm putting this on all of my podcasts, so I'm going to put this out there. So there are 3 podcasts that I do. One with you, Faith Over Breakfast. One for our whole church that other people listen to is Healing the City. And then I have been doing a podcast with my mother because I've been trying to document all of her teachings.
Yeah.
So over that, kind of those 3 podcast things, when I look at the data, I would say there's about an audience of somewhere between 150 to 300 people who listen to those 3 podcasts as we talk.
Okay.
And, I don't have I don't have the space, nor do you have the space to become professional podcasters beyond what we're doing right now.
No. Yeah.
But on every single one of those podcasts, you can, for $3 monthly, support our thing. And if every single one of those, even if just 100 of our listeners were willing to support us for $3, that would give us $300 a month, which would easily pay for someone to have a producer sit with us and do our recording, and even maybe upgrade and give us video and do some other things that would make what we do go out to more people. I think what Faith Over Breakfast is, what Healing the City is, what my mom's podcast is, it's just really valuable, and I think it's helpful for people. But it's not my main ministry. It's not the thing.
Yeah.
It's just the side thing and it's a good way of helping build community. So I will just put that out there to all of you who listen. I'm not going to do
it's
a
like
whole bunch.
half a Starbucks.
Yeah, it's a half Starbucks. You know what? Like
that's a cookie.
It's a cookie.
Yeah,
it's $3. So
buy Eric a cookie.
I want to say thank you to those of you who do support our shows, and we really appreciate it. So,
all right, this
thanks.
is your digital cookie. Hope you enjoyed.
Yep. All right, and email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. Thank you. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.